A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, but early in the morning he arrived again in the temple area, and all the people started coming to him, and he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and made her stand in the middle. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. So what do you say?" They said this to test him, so that they could have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and began to write on the ground with his finger. But when they continued asking him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he bent down and wrote on the ground, and in response they went away one by one, beginning with the elders. So he was left alone with the woman before him. Then Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She replied, "No one, sir." Then Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on do not sin any more." The Gospel of the Lord. A couple of weeks ago, I found an old children's storybook that I used to read to my children 25 years ago. And I wanted to see if they still remembered the book, and so I sent them a recitation of the story and asked them if they remembered it. And they replied, "Yes, I do remember the book. I loved it when you read it to us. This is a really touching story. Thank you for sharing." And so I decided to share the story with my granddaughter, and she loved it. And today I share the story with you, the story of Mr. Bell's Fix-It Shop. And as the story goes, Mr. Bell could fix almost anything. Broken locks, broken clocks, broken pans, broken fans, broken plates, broken skates. He could fix them all. People smiled when they walked past his little shop and saw the sign in the window. It said, "Mr. Bell's Fix-It Shop. I fix everything but broken hearts." And it shows a little picture of a broken heart. Mr. Bell did all his fixing in the back of his shop. At his workbench he kept tools and screws and nails and nuts and bolts. In every musty, dusty corner there were bins and boxes filled with odds and ends. His friends told him his shop was too messy. "Throw some things away," they said. But Mr. Bell said, "No, there's a use for everything. You never know when you will need a doorknob or a pickle jar." Jill, who lived nearby, loved to look around in Mr. Bell's shop. She came nearly every day after school. "I want to have a fix-it shop of my very own when I grow up," she said. So Mr. Bell made her his special helper. One afternoon, as Jill was helping Mr. Bell polish the front window, she asked, "What's a broken heart?" "Well," said Mr. Bell, "when you feel so sad that you think you'll never be happy again, that's when you know your heart is broken." "Gee," said Jill, "I hope I never have a broken heart." One day Mr. Bell was extra busy. Ben the barber had a radio that wouldn't play. "My customers miss the music," he said. "Don't worry," said Mr. Bell. "I'll fix your radio as good as new." Otto, the laundryman, had an iron that wouldn't get hot. "What good are clean clothes if I can't iron them?" he asked. "Don't worry," said Mr. Bell. "I'll fix that iron as good as new." Mr. Bell spent all afternoon at his workbench. "I could certainly use Jill's help today," he thought. "I wonder where she is." It was nearly supper time when Mr. Bell finished his work. Suddenly, Jill burst into the shop. She looked very unhappy. "Why, Jill," said Mr. Bell, "what's wrong?" "I went to Grandma's house today," Jill said. "Her new puppy chewed up Rosie." She held up her doll. "Just look at her." And the doll was tore apart. One arm was gone, and one leg was gone, and her hair was... Mr. Bell forgot about his supper. "Don't cry, Jill," he said. "I'll fix Rosie as good as new." "Really?" asked Jill. She was still crying. "I promise," said Mr. Bell. "You run along now, and don't worry about a thing. I'll see you tomorrow." Mr. Bell took Rosie to his workbench. He found an old baseball bat. "It's a good thing I didn't throw this away," he said. He carved a new arm and a new leg for Rosie. He smoothed away all the splinters and painted and polished the wood. "It's a good thing I didn't throw this away," he said, as he picked up an old lampshade. With scissors and glue, he turned fringes and tassels into beautiful new hair for Rosie. A blue ribbon that matched Rosie's eyes became a big, bright bow for her new hair. Mr. Bell even made Rosie a brand new dress and shiny new shoes from scraps of gingham and satin. Next morning, Jill was waiting for Mr. Bell when he came to open his shop. "Did you fix Rosie?" she asked. "See for yourself," said Mr. Bell, smiling. "Come inside." "Oh, Mr. Bell," Jill exclaimed when she saw the doll. "She looks beautiful." "Good as new," said Mr. Bell, and Jill gave him a big hug. That afternoon, as Jill was helping to polish the window, she said, "You know, Mr. Bell, there's something else I thought you should fix." "What's that?" said Mr. Bell. "This sign," Jill replied. "It says you can't fix broken hearts. But when you fixed Rosie, you fixed my broken heart too." People still smile when they walk past Mr. Bell's Fix-It shop and see the sign in the front. But the sign is just a little different now. The crack in the heart has a bandage painted over it, and the words above it say, Mr. Bell. And we can think about that story about Mr. Bell's Fix-It shop when we remember today's gospel, where the scribes and the Pharisees bring to Jesus this woman who's been caught in the very act of adultery. And they remind him, under the law of Moses, she's too broken. There's nothing to do besides purge their society of her, to put her to death by stoning. But the Romans won't let them do it. And so they try to trap Jesus. What should we do? And he doesn't say yes or no. He just says, "Let he who is without fault cast the first stone." And then he begins to write in the dust with his finger, and whatever he writes, it reminds them of their own problems, their own brokenness. Like Ben the barber's radio and Otto the laundryman's iron. And so they all drift away, and then it's just Christ and the woman. And he is without sin. He could cast the first stone under the law of Moses, but he says, "Go and sin no more." Just like when Mr. Bell looked at that broken doll Rosie, Christ looks upon her, and under the new and everlasting covenant for the forgiveness of sins. And as we look around in our church today, at our priest, your humble deacon, the servers, the congregation, think about Mr. Bell's workshop, where he keeps all the bins and boxes filled with odds and ends, the baseball bats and the lampshades, that the other people wanted him to throw away. And he said, no, there's a use for everything. And so when Christ sees this woman caught in adultery, he says, no, don't throw her away. There's a use for her too. And we are all sinners. In our own ways, we are broken. And he says, no, don't throw them away. You never know when we will need a sacramental blessing from our priest, or a kind word from that person, or a good example from this other person. And if we do those things, we become the instruments of our divine fix-it man. And we can even imagine a little sign on the doors of the church as we come in, and it could say, "Our Savior's fix-it shop." Through us, the members of the church, with us, He can fix everyone, even broken souls, just as good as new.